Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm going to tell you a story, Auntie Mae style. You know Auntie Mae, sweet as pie, sharp as a tack, and absolutely not the one you want to disrespect. It's a story about boundaries, consequences, and a son-in-law who thought he could bulldoze his way through someone else's life, until he learned the hard way that Auntie Mae always stands back up, stronger, louder, and wiser. Respect is not optional, and I learned that truth long before my son-in-law ever thought to test my patience. Respect is the foundation that keeps every home standing, because without it even the strongest walls feel thin and fragile. When someone you trusted decides that your worth can be tossed aside like an unwanted bag of old clothes, something inside you shifts. It is a heavy, slow ache that settles in your chest and refuses to leave until justice decides to show up. That morning when I stepped onto the porch and saw my belongings scattered across the grass, I felt that ache rise like a storm. The lawn looked like a yard sale held by a person who did not understand the value of anything on display. My sweaters, my old church hat, the quilt I sewed during the winter my husband passed. All of it was lying in the open air, as if these pieces of my life were nothing but clutter that needed clearing. Now I am not a woman who demands fancy treatment. I do not expect gifts or praise or parades. All I ask for is respect. A simple thing really. Respect costs nothing yet means everything. But that day my son-in-law acted as if respect were a luxury reserved for special occasions, and certainly not something he needed to offer someone like me. He must have believed that since I was quiet and gentle and generous, I would simply shrug, accept the insult, and move along. People always assume the softest person has the weakest spine. They learn otherwise eventually. So when I stood there looking at my things, I took a deep breath and reminded myself that nothing is lost when you know how to reclaim your place. Respect is about seeing the life in others and understanding that their memories matter. A scarf is not just a scarf when it belonged to a woman who worked 3 jobs to raise her daughter. A photo album is not just paper when those pictures hold the story of a family that survived more storms than anyone can count. When he tossed my belongings, he did more than make a mess. He tossed the evidence of everything I had lived through, everything I had given, everything I had cherished. And that is where disrespect cuts deepest. Not at the surface, but at the roots. People behave boldly when they think no one will challenge them. My son-in-law had grown too confident in his belief that I would stay silent. He thought age made me fragile. He thought kindness meant weakness. He thought having a loud voice made him powerful. He thought he could rewrite the rules of the house simply by acting without thinking. That is what disrespect does. It gives foolish people a false sense of victory. They think they have won because they acted first. But life does not hand trophies to people who stomp on others. Life has a way of reminding them that pride always demands payment. As I stood there, I felt disappointment more than anger. Anger burns fast, but disappointment lingers. I felt disappointment for my daughter who trusted a man that did not know the meaning of honor. I felt disappointment for his mother who had been moved into my room as if I had no place in my own home. And I felt disappointment in him because I had hoped he would one day grow into a man my granddaughter could look up to. But disrespect shrinks people. It makes them smaller than their worst decisions. It makes them look like children pretending to be adults. Still, I did not shout. I did not raise my hand or my voice. I simply watched. You learn a great deal by watching. Respect teaches patience. Patience teaches wisdom. Wisdom teaches timing. I picked up my photo album. I brushed the dirt off my old sweater. And I thought about all the years I had spent building a home filled with love and stability. A home where my children knew that they were safe. A home where kindness was not optional and respect was not negotiable. And here was this man trying to rewrite the culture of my family with the swipe of his careless hand. One of the greatest truths in life is that disrespect never ends where it begins. A person who disrespects you once will do it again unless life corrects them. And life is an excellent teacher. The lesson might arrive slow, but it arrives. I knew not to fight with noise because disrespect thrives on chaos. Instead, I let silence do the work. Silence is powerful. Silence gives people time to think, time to worry, time to replay their choices, time to realize they may have stepped far beyond the boundary of decency. Silence is not surrender. Silence is strategy. So I walked inside the house and looked at the room that was once mine. It smelled different. It felt different. It carried the energy of someone who did not belong. My bedspread had been taken off. My nightstand emptied. My window left open so the breeze could carry away the last traces of my presence. That sight did not break me. It did not scare me. It reminded me that some people do not realize the value of something until it is returned to them with consequences attached. Respect is not optional. It is required. And when someone refuses to offer it, life steps in and demands it on your behalf. I sat in the living room and thought about all the times I had helped this man. The late-night meals I prepared when he came home tired. The mornings I watched the children so he could sleep longer. The advice I gave. The prayers I whispered for his success. The acts of love that I never asked him to repay. Respect is not earned by grand gestures but by consistent appreciation. And he had shown none. That is when I realized that disrespect reveals character. It shows you who a person is when they think no one is watching. And that day he showed me everything I needed to know. Respect is the currency that maintains harmony in a household. When someone refuses to pay their share, the whole structure begins to wobble. A man who does not show respect cannot lead. A man who cannot lead cannot build a strong family. And a man who cannot value the woman who raised his wife will never understand the meaning of unity. He had made a grave mistake, and the weight of that mistake would find him soon enough. As the hours passed, I noticed the shift in the house. My daughter returned from work and her face changed the moment she saw my belongings outside. She may love her husband, but she was raised by me. And I raised her with the understanding that disrespect has no place in a family. Her silence matched mine. Not angry, not dramatic, just sharp enough to cut through the room. My son-in-law began to look uneasy. That is the thing about disrespect. It feels bold in the moment, but it starts to rot the longer it sits in the air. Respect is not optional because it protects relationships. It keeps hearts open. It keeps communication honest. It keeps peace alive. Without respect, everything falls apart. A home without respect is like a pot without a lid. Heat escapes. Flavors fade. Nothing stays whole. And in that moment my son-in-law finally began to understand that the lid had been lifted and nothing in his home would taste the same again until he fixed what he had broken. Respect is not a gift for special occasions. It is a daily practice. And when it is ignored, it demands attention. My son-in-law learned that truth the hard way. He learned that you cannot throw away a woman's belongings without throwing away your own sense of dignity. He learned that you cannot disrespect a mother without shaking the foundation of your own family. He learned that you cannot take without giving. He learned that some lessons are painful because they need to be. And I will tell you this. When life finally taught him the full weight of that lesson, he regretted every choice he made that morning. Because disrespect never ends well. It always returns to the person who started it. And when it does, it returns heavier than before. Respect is not optional. It is the law of every home that hopes to stand strong. And I stand by that law with every breath in my body. People forget who paid the bills far too easily, especially when they start feeling powerful inside a house they never signed for. My son-in-law strutted around like a rooster in a barnyard, acting as though the house belonged to him simply because he lived in it and felt comfortable. Comfort is a sneaky thing. It makes people bold. It tricks them into believing they earned something they merely benefited from. That man forgot that long before he married my daughter and long before he ever placed a single dollar toward utilities or groceries or repairs, I was the one making sure this home stood firm. I was the one who put down the deposit. I was the one who paid every bill while juggling the needs of my children. I took care of this home with my own hands and my own strength. But he chose to forget every piece of that history when he decided that he could move his mother into my room as if I were a guest in my own home. There is something interesting about people who forget financial reality. They walk around with a sense of entitlement they did not earn. They talk big, they act big, and they think big, but they never stop to ask themselves who made the place big enough for them to feel that way in the first place. When he tossed my belongings outside as though they were trash, he showed that he believed the house was his simply because he had a key. But a key is not ownership. A key is permission, and that permission can be revoked faster than a light switch can be flipped. I remember the early years after my husband passed. Money was tight and every bill that arrived in the mail felt like another test of strength. I worked long hours and came home exhausted, yet still found the energy to make sure the roof did not leak and the pantry stayed full. I patched walls with my own fingers and painted rooms with my own hands because I could not afford help. Every corner of that home held a piece of my effort. Every wall carried a memory. Every step across the floor echoed the sacrifices I made so my children would grow up in a safe place. For someone to walk in without contributing a fraction of that labor and behave like the king of the castle was not just disrespectful. It was delusional. People forget who paid the bills because they never had to face the weight of responsibility themselves. They think running a home is easy. They think it all just happens. They forget the nights when I sat at the kitchen table calculating how to stretch $1 far enough to cover everything. They forget the winter when I had to choose between a new coat for my daughter and repairing the heating system. They forget how many times I went without to make sure the house remained warm, safe and stable. They forget because they never needed to know. They walked into a finished story and assumed they were the author. My son-in-law assumed ownership based on convenience, not contribution. He decided that since he married into the family he had equal say over the home. Equal authority, equal power. But authority and power are not wedding gifts. They are earned through responsibility, through contribution, through respect for the person who carried the burden long before you arrived. But he walked in acting like he had done something extraordinary by simply existing under a roof someone else built. That is why he felt bold enough to remove my things. He believed the house was his. But belief without truth is a dangerous thing. There is a shift that happens inside a home when someone claims ownership they have not earned. The air grows heavy, tension moves through the walls. The harmony breaks. A home is more than wood and paint. It is energy and memory and history. When a person who did none of the building tries to take control, that energy becomes unstable. And that is exactly what happened the moment he decided he could treat me like a visitor. He introduced chaos into a place that had survived hardship and still stood tall. I watched him walk around giving orders to his mother, telling her how she could settle into my room as if he had purchased that space himself. His pride was so loud it drowned out all common sense. He truly believed he owned the place. But ownership is written on paper and my name was the one printed in black ink. My signature was the one that secured the mortgage. My sweat and sacrifice were the ones that turned a simple structure into a home. He forgot all of that because he confused comfort with power. People forget who paid the bills until they are shown the paperwork. Until they are reminded that legality does not bow to arrogance. Until they discover that the quiet woman they underestimated holds more authority than they ever imagined. Financial responsibility carries weight, and that weight does not disappear just because someone new moves in and decides to flex their ego. When someone tries to claim a space they did not build, life has a way of handing them reality in a hard, sharp lesson. I sat in the kitchen sipping tea as he marched around acting like a landlord. My daughter stayed quiet, but her silence spoke loudly. She knew who had built the foundation of her childhood. She knew who created the home she now shared with him. She watched him expose his own ignorance with every step. She knew I did not need to raise my voice or argue. She knew the law and the truth were sitting right there with me. People who forget who paid the bills often forget that the person who holds the papers holds the power. And power does not shout. Power does not panic. Power does not beg. Power waits. The next morning the house felt tense. His mother looked uncomfortable because she sensed something was wrong. She may have been willing to move into my room, but she could feel she did not belong there. She could feel that she was occupying a space built by another woman. A space earned by another woman. A space protected by another woman. And a space that would soon return to its rightful owner. She noticed the quiet way I moved around the house. She noticed the way my daughter watched her husband without saying a word. She noticed the way her son avoided my eyes. People do not avoid eye contact unless their conscience is heavy. People forget who paid the bills until they feel the ground shift beneath their feet. Until they realize they built nothing and therefore have no foundation to stand on. Until they understand that the person they disrespected is the same person who controls the stability of their life. My son-in-law learned that truth the moment the eviction notice arrived. Not for me but for him. He had pushed too far. He had behaved as though the house belonged to him. But the law said otherwise. When he held that paper in his hands, his confidence melted. His shoulders sank. His voice cracked. That is the moment when reality reached him and taught him the lesson he had avoided. You cannot claim ownership without contribution. You cannot claim authority without responsibility. You cannot treat the owner like a burden and expect to remain in comfort. People forget who paid the bills until the day comes when they need the person who paid them. My son-in-law learned that too. He learned it painfully, thoroughly, completely. He learned that the roof over his head came from my labor and my dedication. He learned that the home he took for granted was a gift, not a right. And he learned that no matter how loudly he acted, he would never hold more power than the woman who built the place. And after all of that, he regretted everything he had done. Because forgetting who paid the bills does not erase the truth. It only delays the moment you must face it. And he faced it with a weight that he will never forget again. Silence is a warning, not surrender, and I learned the strength of silence long before my son-in-law ever tested it. People misunderstand silence. They think it means defeat. They think it means fear. They think it means you have no power left to speak. But silence is not weakness. Silence is a strategy. Silence is the breath you take before the storm that reshapes the land. And when my son-in-law thought he could disrespect me and face no consequences, he learned what silence truly means. When I saw my belongings scattered across the yard and my room taken over, I felt a sharp pain in my chest, but I did not shout. I did not rush in with anger. I did not waste breath on a man who had already shown he could not hear wisdom. Instead, I let everything grow quiet inside me. My mind sharpened. My heart steadied. My thoughts aligned. Silence does that for a woman who has lived long enough to know that the loudest voice rarely wins the battle. The most patient voice does. I walked past my things with a slow, steady step. The wind rustled the pages of my photo album. The sunlight touched the quilt I had made from scraps of my children's baby clothes. The grass held my memories as gently as I once held those children. The scene was painful, but pain does not destroy a woman who has weathered storms. Pain becomes instruction. Pain becomes clarity. Pain becomes a reminder that your reaction shapes the outcome. So I reacted with silence. As I stepped into the house, the air shifted. His mother sat in my room with her feet up on the window ledge. She looked surprised to see me but said nothing. My son-in-law walked in behind me with a puffed-up chest, ready for an argument. He wanted a fight because he believed a fight would prove he was in control. But I refused to give him that satisfaction. Silence takes power away from those who crave conflict. It robs them of the fuel they need to justify their bad behavior. He stood there expecting rage, but all he got was a calm look from a woman who had already decided her next move. Silence unsettles the guilty. It starts to echo inside their minds. It forces them to hear their own actions without distraction. And my silence filled that house like a growing shadow. My son-in-law shifted nervously. He tapped his foot. He cleared his throat. He looked everywhere except at me. Guilt has a strange way of revealing itself when no words are spoken. People run from silence because silence holds a mirror. And he did not like the reflection. I went to the kitchen and made tea. Slowly, softly, every movement controlled. I could feel him watching me, waiting for an explosion that never came. Silence makes a person wonder what you know, what you are planning, what strength you are hiding. Silence is the pause before consequences, and he began to sense it. My daughter returned home an hour later, and the look on her face when she stepped into the yard told me she understood immediately. She did not shout either. She did not ask what happened. Her silence matched mine because she knows her mother well. She knows silence from me is never accidental. It is intentional. It is precise. It is the moment before action. People who underestimate silence often confuse it with surrender. They think you have no fight left. They think you have accepted defeat. They think they have won. But the truth is, silence is not the end of a chapter. It is the deep inhale before you turn the page with purpose. While he believed my quiet was a sign of weakness, I was arranging every detail of the justice he had invited with his own behavior. I watched him through the corner of my eye as he walked back and forth, trying to make himself appear calm. He told his mother everything was fine, but his voice wavered. He tried to joke with my daughter, but she did not smile. The silence around him grew heavier. It followed him from room to room like a cold shadow. Silence has a way of squeezing the truth out of a person even before you say a single word. After dinner I sat in the living room chair that he had pushed into the hallway earlier that morning. I placed it back in its rightful place and sat with poise. Not anger, not fear, just quiet authority. My daughter sat beside me. My son-in-law stood near the door shifting his weight from one foot to the other. He was waiting for someone to speak but neither of us did. Silence gathered in the room like fog rolling across a field. Thick, heavy, inescapable. He finally muttered something about making changes for the good of the household but his words fell flat in the quiet air. Silence strips excuses down to their bare bones. Silence reveals truth. Later that night when the house grew still I heard his mother whispering to him in worried tones. Even she felt the pressure of the silence. She asked him if he was sure he had handled the situation correctly. She asked why I was not reacting. She asked why my daughter was so quiet. She sensed what he refused to admit. Silence meant something was coming. Silence is a warning, not surrender, because silence lets you see clearly. It gives you space to think. It allows your emotions to settle. It helps you evaluate your options with clarity. I knew exactly what needed to be done and I knew that reacting emotionally would only feed his ego. So I let him sit with the discomfort of not knowing what I would do. That discomfort grew as he replayed his actions in his mind. The longer I stayed quiet the more he felt the weight of his choices. When a person wrongs you loudly show them correction quietly. That is the rule I have lived by. Noise causes confusion but silence causes reflection. And reflection exposes guilt. By the next morning he was quieter. His steps were slower. His eyes avoided mine. He tried to make friendly conversation but there was a crack in his voice. Silence had done its work. He now understood that something was wrong and he could not fix it with charm or excuses. He ate breakfast at the table in tense silence while I prepared myself for the day. I could feel him watching me from the corner of his eye. He wanted to know what I was thinking but silence denied him that privilege. People crave control and silence removes control completely. It forces them to sit inside their own discomfort with no escape. That is why silence is powerful. It is a teacher. It teaches humility. It teaches patience. It teaches awareness. And my son-in-law was learning every lesson slowly and painfully. When I left the house that morning he stared at the door long after I closed it. He felt the truth rising around him like a tightening rope. He had poked a sleeping giant. He had disrespected the woman who built the home he lived in. He had crossed a line that could not be erased. And the silence reminded him of that every time he breathed. Silence is not surrender because silence holds knowledge. And knowledge holds power. I sat across from the legal advisor later that afternoon and explained everything calmly. He listened, he nodded, and he gave me the exact steps to reclaim what was mine. No shouting, no arguing, just action. That is the thing about silence. It gives you time to move strategically and with strength. When I returned home my son-in-law tried to greet me with a smile but the fear behind his eyes spoke louder than any words. My daughter looked at me with quiet understanding. She knew something had shifted. She knew silence had reached its peak and that the next stage was consequences. That evening I placed the envelope on the coffee table. I did not say a word. He reached for it with shaking hands. He opened it. He read it. His face drained of life. That moment proved what silence can do. Silence unsettles the arrogant. Silence exposes the guilty. Silence makes truth unavoidable. And silence makes consequences unavoidable too. He looked up at me with wide eyes filled with regret but I remained calm. Silence had done all the speaking I needed. It had given him time to think. To regret. To fear. To understand. Silence had prepared his heart for the weight of the reality he now held in his hands. My silence was not surrender. My silence was a promise. A promise that I would not accept disrespect. A promise that I would reclaim what was mine. A promise that I would stand firm without raising my voice. And that promise was fulfilled without one single shout. Silence is a warning because it means a woman has reached a level of clarity that cannot be shaken. And my son-in-law learned that truth with every regret that grew heavier in his chest. He would never again mistake silence for weakness. He would never again assume that a quiet woman has surrendered. Because he learned in the hardest way possible that silence can be the sharpest and most powerful response of all. You do not evict a woman from her own home and think the world will clap for you. That is not how life works. That is not how respect works. And that is certainly not how Auntie Mae works. A home is not just a building. It is the place where memories breathe. It is the place where sacrifices live. It is the place where every corner holds a piece of the person who built it. When my son-in-law decided he would evict me from my own room and move his mother in, he thought he was making a bold statement. But the only thing he boldly declared was that he had no understanding of consequences or history or ownership or wisdom. A home is sacred to the woman who builds it. I had spent years turning that house into a sanctuary for my children and later for my grandchildren. I scrubbed floors until they shined. I patched cracks in the wall with my own hands. I painted rooms while humming old hymns to steady my spirit. Every inch of that home carried my fingerprints. Every room carried a story of survival and strength. You cannot take a woman away from the home she poured her soul into without waking a fire inside her. And that is what he did. He woke something in me that had been quiet for many years. It was not anger. It was not revenge. It was purpose. When I walked into my room and saw a different woman sitting where my pillows once lay, I felt a sharp cold feeling in my chest. Not because she was there, but because of how I had been erased. My pictures removed. My blankets folded and pushed aside. My drawer emptied. My dresser taken over by someone who did not know a single chapter of my life. And what hurt most was not the action itself but the intention behind it. It was the belief that I could be pushed out without a second thought. It was the belief that my presence was optional. It was the belief that I had no claim to the space I created. Eviction is a heavy word. It carries the weight of finality. It means you have no right to stay. It means you are being forced out. But to evict someone, you must hold authority. You must hold legal power. You must hold responsibility. And my son-in-law held none of those things. What he held was arrogance. What he held was ignorance. What he held was disrespect. And none of those provide the right to evict anyone from anything. Least of all the woman who owned the home. When he told me with a straight face that I needed to find somewhere else to sleep because his mother needed the room for her comfort, I watched something shift in him. It was the confidence of a man who believed he had already won. He believed he had taken control. He believed he had established dominance. He believed he had asserted himself as the authority in the house. But authority without legitimacy is nothing more than foolishness dressed in pride. I asked him one question in my soft, steady voice. I asked him if he was truly certain this was the decision he wanted to make. He puffed up like a parade balloon and said yes. He said it proudly too. So proudly that his mother glanced at him with hesitation. She could sense the danger in his certainty even if he could not. Some people walk into trouble with their eyes open because they mistake their reflection for wisdom. He did not see the cliff he was stepping toward. He did not hear the crack beneath his feet. He did not feel the shift in the air. But I did. I felt all of it. You cannot evict a woman from her own home because a home is not built on convenience. It is built on effort. It is built on sacrifice. It is built on history. And I had earned every right to that house with years of sleepless nights and determined mornings. I had earned it with late rent payments that I still managed to make on time. I had earned it with meals cooked from almost nothing. I had earned it with hope and discipline and survival. I had earned it with every heartbeat that kept my family alive. My silence unsettled him. He did not understand why I did not fight. He expected shouting. He expected crying. He expected begging. But I did none of that. I simply gathered what he had left of my things and placed them neatly by the hallway. My calm scared him more than any storm ever could have. Because calm means preparation. Calm means strategy. Calm means the decision has already been made in the heart of the quiet one. Later that evening I sat at the dining table with my daughter. She looked at me with tearful eyes. She knew what her husband had done was beyond disrespect. She knew he had crossed a line so deep it cut the roots of our family bond. She apologized, but I stopped her gently. This was not her burden. This was a lesson her husband would have to learn. And life teaches those lessons with a heavy hand. The next morning I made a call. A single short call. A call to someone who knew my history with that home. A call to someone who knew the paperwork. A call to someone who understood the importance of legality. You see, when you own something, you do not need to shout about your rights. You simply use them. I walked outside and breathed the cool air while my son-in-law strutted around the house like a man who believed he had secured victory. But he did not know what was coming. He had mistaken silence for surrender. He had mistaken patience for passivity. He had mistaken grace for weakness. When the legal documents arrived 2 days later, he was in the living room watching television. He opened the door expecting a package or a delivery, but instead he was handed the truth. The truth wrapped in official papers stating that he and his mother were the ones who had no legal right to occupy any part of the house. The truth that his behavior had triggered a review of property rights. The truth that he could not make decisions in a home that did not belong to him. His eyes widened, his hands shook, his arrogance cracked. He read the papers again and again as if the words might rearrange themselves. They did not. They stood firm, just like the house stood firm. The home I built, the home I owned, the home he tried to take from me. He realized then that the power he thought he had was nothing more than air. Thin, empty, meaningless. He realized that evicting me from my own room was not only disrespectful but legally impossible. He realized that the home was never his to claim or control. His mother packed her things that afternoon. She avoided my eyes, but I held no anger toward her. She had simply followed the path her son laid out. But his path was foolish and steep, and now she had to walk back down it with him. My daughter stood quietly at the doorway watching the man she married face the consequences he had created with his own hands. She saw him humbled. She saw him frightened. She saw him understand that he had disrespected the wrong woman. A person who tries to evict someone from their own home reveals their character. They show their greed. They show their entitlement. They show their lack of understanding. But they also show their vulnerability, because when life corrects them, it corrects them thoroughly. My son-in-law regretted every action he took. He regretted every word he said. He regretted every moment of pride that led him to believe he could force me out. He learned a lesson that day. A lesson carved deep into his spirit. You do not evict a woman from her own home. Not legally, not morally, not spiritually, not ever. Because a home built on the shoulders of a strong woman does not fall easily. It stands firm, just like she does. Actions have a way of returning to the one who sets them in motion, even when the person believes they are safe from consequence. Life might be slow and patient, yet it is precise and it never forgets. When my son-in-law decided to toss out my belongings and bring his mother into my room, he believed he was making a decision that would strengthen his standing in the household. He believed he was taking charge and proving some imagined authority. What he did not see was that every action begins a chain that always finds its way back home. His choices were like stones thrown into a still pond, and though the ripples take time, they always return to the source. In the first few days he walked around with a proud lift in his shoulders. He thought his plan had worked. He thought I had been defeated and that my silence was surrender. He believed the situation had settled in his favor. The house felt different, though not in the way he imagined. His mother settled into my room with an air of triumph while he strutted through the hallway believing he had achieved some grand victory. Yet what he did not see was the subtle shift in everyone else. My daughter tried to stay calm, yet her eyes betrayed a deep unease. My grandchildren moved around the house with uncertainty, as though the air itself had turned heavy. Even the walls seemed to echo with a quiet understanding that something had gone terribly wrong. In those early days he did not feel the echo of his actions, though the first waves had already begun. Actions rarely echo in dramatic thunder on day one. Instead they whisper at first. They tap on the corners of a person's awareness and grow louder with time. So though he believed he had reached the peak of his control, the truth was that he had set in motion the slow return of every disrespectful act he had thrown my way. When I calmly took note of what had happened and quietly spoke with the right people, he remained oblivious. He believed my stillness meant weakness. This is a common mistake made by those who think power is loud. They assume volume equals strength and silence equals defeat. Yet silence is often preparation and focus. It is the gathering of strength before the echo returns. I knew the law, I knew the paperwork, and I knew exactly where my name rested in the records. I knew the rights I held, and I understood what steps to take. I did not need to shout. Life would shout for me soon enough. His first uneasy moment came when my daughter asked him why he had made such a drastic decision without discussing it with her. He stumbled through an answer. He spoke with confidence at first, then faltered as she kept staring straight at him with a disappointment that cut deeper than anger ever could. That was the first hint of the echo. A small one but clear enough to unsettle him. For the first time he realized he might not receive the unquestioned support he had expected. The second wave arrived when his mother began to complain about the room. She said the mattress was too firm and the light was too bright in the morning and the window was too old and the floor had a slight slant near the corner. She wanted changes. She wanted attention. She wanted things he could not easily provide. Suddenly the grand triumph of replacing me with his mother turned into a list of new responsibilities he had not planned for. He had removed the wrong person from that room because I had always done more for that space than he ever realized. I kept it clean, warm and orderly. I maintained it with care and love. He had replaced that steady presence with someone who demanded constant adjustments. The echo returned again. By then I had already placed the wheels of formality in motion. The notice was being processed and every document had been reviewed. Still he went on believing he had secured his win. He told a few friends that he was now the man of the house and that he had set new rules. Little did he know that those words would soon sound foolish even to himself. The next part of the echo landed when the official notice arrived. I watched from the kitchen as he opened the envelope with a puzzled expression. As his eyes scanned the words, his face shifted from confusion to shock to disbelief. He looked at me, then back at the papers, then at my daughter. The room grew still. He tried to argue with the air itself because he had no real argument to offer. The law was clear. Ownership was clear. Authority was clear. What he had done had put him in direct violation of rights he had not even bothered to understand. The echo grew louder as reality hit him. His mother panicked next. She packed her things in a hurry, insisting she never wanted to be a burden. She realized the room she had taken was never hers to have and she feared being involved in something she had not fully understood. She spoke rapidly about wanting to leave before the situation worsened. She urged her son to apologize to me and restore peace. Suddenly the woman who had once lounged in my room with victory in her smile now looked small, worried and eager to escape the fallout. The echo hit them both. Yet the most powerful wave of all came from my daughter. She sat him down that night and demanded an explanation that he could not give. She looked at him with a seriousness I had rarely seen and told him he had violated trust, respect and the foundation of their home. She spoke with strength and clarity, reminding him that a household is not built on control but on cooperation and understanding. She asked him why he felt the need to treat her mother with such disregard. He had no answer. The echo had grown so loud that he could no longer pretend he did not hear it. He tried to apologize to me the next morning. His voice cracked at the edges. His pride had been stripped away by the very actions he once bragged about. He said he did not think things through. He said he acted out of frustration. He said he believed he was protecting his family but ended up hurting it instead. His words were soft, hesitant and distant from the bold air he had once worn. He learned then that actions return in forms far heavier than they are cast. His final echo came from within his own sense of self. For weeks afterward he walked more carefully. He spoke with more thought. He learned that strength is not in overpowering others but in honoring them. He learned that disrespect does not vanish into thin air but circles back like a hawk finding its prey. Every wave had reached him in full and he was changed by the force of it. Actions always echo. They may circle quietly for a time, yet they always come home. My son-in-law learned this truth not in theory but in experience. He learned that the echo of disrespect is humiliation, the echo of arrogance is regret, and the echo of cruelty is consequence. What he gave out returned to him multiplied. And in the end what returned to me was peace, strength, and the satisfaction of knowing that life always keeps balance even when people forget how it works. My son-in-law forgot one truth that life keeps tucked under its sleeve and brings out at the right moment. He forgot that the woman who raised the woman he married is not to be underestimated. He did not realize that strength can be quiet. He did not realize that wisdom can be gentle. He did not realize that patience can hold more power than any loud outburst ever could. He looked at me and saw someone who had grown older. He saw someone who moved at a slower pace. He saw someone who did not fight back in the loud ways he understood. Yet what he did not see was the years of life that shaped me. He did not see the storms I had survived. He did not see the mountains I had climbed. He did not see that the woman who raised his wife had earned her steadiness by facing life with courage and consistency. I raised my daughter with values that run deeper than simple words. I taught her that respect is a foundation, not a suggestion. I taught her that kindness is strength, not weakness. I taught her that patience is not quiet surrender but thoughtful timing. I taught her that love should not make her small. I taught her that she comes from a line of women who do not crumble under pressure. So when my son-in-law disrespected me, he was not just stepping on my dignity. He was stepping on the roots that held his own wife upright. He was stepping on the soil that grew his own family. A man who disrespects the mother of his wife erodes the structure that holds his entire household together, whether he realizes it or not. The day he threw out my things, he thought he could push me aside like a loose chair. He thought I would simply accept defeat. He believed he had secured control. He believed he had proven something to himself. He did not understand that the quiet way I handled the situation was not acceptance. It was strategy. It was the way of a woman who had raised a daughter with the same fire that burned inside her. A fire that stays controlled until needed. A fire that rises only at the right moment. When my daughter confronted him, her voice held the strength of every lesson I ever taught her. She stood tall and steady. She did not yell. She did not crumble. She showed him exactly who she came from. And as she spoke, I saw the moment it hit him. He realized that the woman he married did not grow from weakness. She grew from the foundation I built stone by stone, year after year, through hardship and love. She grew under the guidance of a mother who would not bend when disrespected but would act with purpose. The heartbreak in her eyes was not just for the betrayal of her mother. It was for the discovery that the man she married had so little understanding of her strength and her origins. When she questioned him, every word she spoke carried the history of the household he had so carelessly disrupted. Her voice was steady but filled with disappointment. She did not need volume to make her point. She simply reminded him of who she was, and who I was, and who we both refused to become. He had assumed that removing me from my room would weaken me. Instead, it awakened something in all of us. My daughter stepped into a strength she had not needed before. My grandchildren watched closely and learned what family loyalty truly looks like. Even his own mother realized she had been pulled into something she never should have touched. She saw that the strength in that house did not come from force. It came from the quiet unity of women who had years of resilience built into their bones. As I watched my daughter hold him accountable, I felt no anger. I felt a deep knowing. A knowing that the values I planted in her had grown into a force even stronger than I imagined. She looked at him with the same fire I once used to face down life when it tried to break me. She told him that disrespecting her mother was disrespecting her as well. She told him that his actions shook the trust she placed in him. She told him that marriage is built on love, respect, and partnership. Not on control, not on domination, not on arrogance. And in that moment he finally saw what he had overlooked. His wife was not raised by chance. She was raised by intention. She was raised by a mother who taught her to stand up not through shouts but through firmness. She was raised by a mother who taught her to choose peace but never surrender dignity. She was raised with a backbone crafted through struggle and love. She was raised in a home where respect was non-negotiable. He saw the full weight of that truth when my daughter told him he had broken something far more delicate than property. He had broken the balance of the household. He had broken the sense of safety that her mother deserved. He had broken the unspoken bond between a husband and the family he married into. And she made it clear that healing would not come easily. When he apologized to me, he did so with the understanding that he had not just wronged me. He had wronged the woman he vowed to honor and cherish. He understood now that when he disrespected me, he shook the roots of his own marriage. He realized that the strength he admired in his wife came from the very woman he had tried to push aside. His apology was quiet and sincere, not because he feared consequences, but because he finally understood them. He finally saw the history behind my calm. He saw the stories etched into my silence. He saw the years of endurance in my eyes. He saw that the woman he underestimated was the foundation of the very love he wanted to protect. What he learned in those long days of reflection was a lesson many overlook. Families are not built on power. They are built on respect. And respect begins with honoring the people who shaped the one you chose as your partner. The woman who raised his wife did not need to shout to be heard. My silence carried weight he felt only when the consequences returned. But the deepest truth he learned was this: never underestimate a woman who has lived through storms and still stands with grace. Never underestimate a woman who raised children with steady hands and a strong heart. Never underestimate the quiet force of someone who has survived life by learning when to speak and when to act. And above all, never underestimate the woman who raised the woman you married, because if you hurt her you stir a power far older and stronger than you can imagine. I did not seek revenge. I did not want victory. I wanted respect restored. I wanted peace restored. And I wanted my daughter to see that strength can be soft yet unshakable. In the end he understood. He saw the truth he had missed. He realized that the foundation of his marriage was stronger than he thought because it was built by a woman who had learned resilience through years of living. And once he understood that truth, his arrogance faded. His pride softened. His behavior changed. Not because he feared me, but because he finally understood me. And he finally understood her. The woman he married. The woman I raised. The woman who now stood before him with a strength he could not ignore. So yes, he regretted what he did. But more than regret, he gained clarity. He learned a lesson that reshaped his heart. And he learned it from the quiet power of the mother-in-law he underestimated.